Thank you. There are some who say that our trade deficit is because the American people, something matter with them. They don't save, run federal deficits. We ran a federal surplus under Clinton. We still had an enormous trade deficit. There are even more people who are out there saying that our trade deficit is because our workers are lazy or overpaid. But the real answer is we're running a trade deficit because the middle class has been betrayed by Washington and Wall Street. And if we had a government as good as our people, we'd be running a trade surplus. Now, we can wax eloquently about how wonderful trade agreements are, but it's important to actually read the agreement, particularly Annex 22C of the Korea Free Trade Agreement and the sourcing rules in that agreement. And when we look at that, we see that this agreement is not what it's made out to be. It's made out to be, okay, goods produced by Americans get entry into the South Korean market, goods produced by South Koreans get into the U.S. market. Now, we could argue maybe that would be a good deal, maybe not. But the Korea Free Trade Agreement allows goods made in China and North Korea free access to the American market. Let's first talk about China. I'm going to use the figure 65% because that's the percentage that applies to autos, auto parts, steel, and electronics. Different percentages apply to different products. If the goods are made 65% in China, then brought to South Korea, where the other 35% of the work is done, they get free access to our markets. So China, without allowing a single additional American good into their country, gets access to our market. But it's not that the 35% of the work done in South Korea has to be done by South Koreans, because they have in South Korea barracks filled with Chinese workers. So the other 35% of the work can be done by Chinese workers living in barracks in South Korea. Now I'm told, well, don't worry about that because at least those Chinese workers are being paid almost $4 an hour. But wait a minute. Those Chinese workers don't see the $4 an hour because the money is taken from them to pay for all that wonderful barracks living. So they get as much money net as the employer wants to give them. So we have goods 65% made in China, 35% made by Chinese workers in barracks, coming into our country duty-free, and China doesn't open their market to us at all. You have to read the agreement and see its implications. Even worse, North Korea. 65%, if the goods are partially made in North Korea, partially made in South Korea, they'll come to a U.S. port. At that point, under the agreement, they have a right to come into our country. But under American law, we bar them at the port because we don't accept North Korean goods. What's the effect? Well, our law will apply. We'll bar the goods. And then North Korea can find us not in compliance with the agreement, which would have the additional disadvantage of being true. And then South Korea can do to us exactly what Mexico did. Find us in violation of a trade agreement and take away from us the advantages that we originally were promised when we signed the agreement. Once those goods are barred, then South Korea can raise tariffs by billions of dollars, just as Mexico has when we didn't, in their view, adhere to NAFTA, and bar U.S. exports to North Korea. And then finally, we have the Kaesong and similar special manufacturing zones, places where workers are paid perhaps $7 or $8 a month if they see that. They don't actually pay anything by the employer. The money goes to the North Korean government. And under Annex 22C, a future administration could just enter an executive agreement and let those goods 100% made in slave conditions in North Korea into the United States duty-free. And executive decisions they'd have to waive our ban on North Korean goods, which the executive department of this government can do, and they would have to reach an executive agreement with the South Korean government viewing Kaesong as under the jurisdiction of the South Korean government. So it's one thing to tell American workers that they're going to get access to the South Korean market and that South Koreans will have access to our market. But when you allow goods 65% made in China, 35% made by Chinese workers in barracks in South Korea, when you allow goods made in North Korea or goods made in the Kaesong Industrial Zone into our country, the only way to pass this agreement is to hide its real implications from the American people. Thank you. Sir, one of your predecessors was one of the most storied diplomats that we've had in the last 20 years. And yet I think his testimony before, I believe it was this subcommittee about 5 years ago, illustrates what I fear is a feeling of benign neglect toward U.S. jobs. Because this was a man who we trusted very much and who wouldn't make an obvious mistake in anything he really cared about. And he testified as to how he, as our ambassador to South Korea, was promoting American jobs because he put Chrysler cars on the lawn of the embassy and invited South Koreans to see how great they were. And one of the cars was the Crossfire, a Daimler Chrysler product made entirely in Germany. I have checked. The German embassy to South Korea did nothing to promote American-made automobiles to the South Korean market. And I wonder whether you, sir, would come before this subcommittee and advocate we open our markets duty-free to goods that are 65% made in China, 35% made by Chinese workers in barracks in South Korea. Is that something fair for American workers to have to compete against? And is there does it make any sense to give Chinese products access to our markets when we only get access to the South Korean market and not to the Chinese market?
Let me first say that very much appreciate the compliments to my predecessor, who in fact was deeply committed to promoting U.S. economic interests in South Korea, and I humbly submit that I worked with him often in that endeavor and previously, and he was a very strong supporter for American jobs and American engagement in the Asian-Pacific region. I would like, if you will allow me, Congressman, I think there are a couple of things that were said that would, at least in my view, I'd like to...
Sir, I have very limited time. I'd like you to address the question. Does it make any sense for us, in a deal that does not get us any access to the Chinese market, to open our markets duty-free to goods that are 65% Chinese-made?
I would simply say I believe the Korea Free Trade Agreement, as currently negotiated, is in the best strategic interests of the United States, and I believe that it will go along.
Did you understand before my opening statement that goods 65% made in China were going to have free access to the United States market?
I think perhaps in another setting we could probably go and explore whether we have differences of view on this particular matter.
This is a wonderful setting if you just answer my question.
Well, I would simply say that I think there were two statements you made. I think the issue of Chinese component in manufacturing in South Korea is something that we could debate and discuss. The other matter that you discussed about whether this will somehow apply to North Korea, I think is clearly incorrect.
Can you get a statement from the South Korean government that they will never hold America to be in violation of this agreement if goods that are 1% North Korean made are barred at our ports?
It is longstanding U.S. policy that...
No, I know the goods won't come in. The question is whether the South Koreans are going to then find us in violation of this agreement. They're waiting for the opportunity to take away every concession they've made. Mm-hmm. And you can't get them to make a statement like this because that takes away the advantage that they expect.
I believe that, first of all, some of the details of this are better discussed by our representatives at the U.S. Trade Representatives. But I happen to know that on these particular issues, there was a lot of discussion back and forth between the United States and South Korea. And I believe there is a clear understanding on the part of our South...
There could be a new administration in South Korea. There will be a time where there'll be a pharaoh that knew not Joseph, and The text of the agreement is the text of the agreement. And you have nothing in writing from the South Koreans that they will not point to the text of that agreement and raise tariffs on American chickens or whatever else they want to raise tariffs on when we bar those North Korean goods from our port.
Let me just say it is very long-standing American policy, of which the Obama administration has no intention of changing, that we will prohibit North Korean imports into the United States. The South Koreans have been this point has been made very clearly to them. I believe they understand this very clearly.
And they then understand that the moment we enforce our law, they are free under this agreement to impose countervailing tariffs on American goods, and they are looking forward to that opportunity, which they will not deprive themselves of by sending a letter claiming that announcing that they will not use that tactic.
With respect, Congressman, I believe that there is a very different understanding between the United States and South Korea. Now, you may say, well, look, there can be
in 2 years there'll be a new South Korean government.
Look, it is the case that with all agreements that are negotiated between two countries that you have to always be vigilant going forward. But I will tell you,
if you sign an agreement that is faulty, look, then you say you're going to be vigilant.
Look, I don't.
My time has expired.
But we have very clear protections, and we've made very clear to the South Koreans that we will not import goods produced in North Korea.
You have nothing signed by them. I yield back.